Hello and welcome back to the Apprentice 1-to-1 podcast. This is episode 4 of our week-long effort to celebrate the Skills for Life theme of National Apprenticeship Week. Hopefully these are of some use. I am trying my best to include as much in there as I can from the real-world experience I've built up, both through going through an apprenticeship, helping other people go through them, and just my involvement with industry, if you like, as we've set out through these other episodes. Today, we're going to have a look at career prospects, and that's kind of multifaceted because it goes into all kinds of different rabbit holes if you let it, and we are restricted to our little 10-minute slot that I've limited these to here. We've got the different segments of industry, if you like. We've got the opportunity where you can be an employee or a business owner. There is the wider industry figures as well. These are from a government level and again involving TESP. But we'll really break it down right at the start by saying there's the three traditional areas of industry, and that's domestic, commercial and industrial. So you could go through an apprenticeship and for whatever reason after that time you may be looking to move into a specific area that wasn't in, because as I said at the start of all this, it's really hard to get a job as an apprenticeship in any area of industry. So it may be that you've taken a role and gone for your apprenticeship, but it's not what you want to do longer term. So the domestic sector is exactly what it says on the tin really. It's going into people's homes and doing electrical work. That could be a basic maintenance, swapping your light fittings, fault finding, installing new kitchen appliances, to rewires, and changing consumer units, doing big garden schemes and smart lighting. All the home automation stuff you can get now is incredible, and it spills out into other areas as well. So you could start looking at security, networking, home automation, all those kind of things. The domestic sector is really large, and I've left off the biggest part of the domestic sector for good reason, because we're going to cover that as a separate entity in its own right in a minute. But yeah, you can go off and do that. So you go into people's homes and work with them on renovations, maintenance, fault finding and such. And we do that in our business. That's a really, really good way actually to learn your craft as an electrician, because it is so varied. One week you may be hunting down a tripping RCD or AFDD in the more modern cases that you guys and girls might be experiencing in the coming years. And that can really test your ability to fault find. Fault finding is a fine art, and it comes with experience and understanding how to work your test gear and follow instinct is my best tips on that. And again, just the varied things you'd be asked to do. So you'll be putting holes in stuff, you'll be maybe installing bits of timber and things, and it's not just working as an electrician. Routing cables around a building that's already finished is quite complicated in itself. So it's a really good way to cut your teeth and build up a solid base of skills to help you through industry. The commercial side of stuff is what you might typically be going off to do in a local warehouse, for example, or an office block, where you could be running power track in the floor, you might have buzz bar systems, you could have lighting that's controlled via contactors and PIR sensors, access control, could be some complicated fire alarms, you may have like lifts, air conditioning, those kind of things. You imagine a normal office block that you go into, and all of the lighting and stuff you see around, it's basically installing all of that. And they are really, really interesting, because you get to do a lot of what we call metal munching. So you'll have your tray and containment, setting out and following plans. So typically in the domestic sector, you may, if you're lucky, get some plans, and they're very rarely to scale or spec. You'll just see that there's a socket in that corner, and it's not super duper precise unless you're working with some of the new build housing developers where they have got those plans. Where at a commercial sector, there'll generally be a CAD drawing, and you'll work into that drawing. So a designer will have set out how the electrical installation needs to be installed, and you then work with the project manager on site to carry that out. And it doesn't always go in that way, because sometimes the designer hasn't seen site. There may be some unique obstacles you need to get around, or reasons that it can't be exactly as it is, and that's where you use your engineering judgment to work with the project manager and find a solution, and then feed that back to the designer to amend those plans. But yeah, that's the difference you might find in those environments. And again, as we spoke about on the podcast with Craig, going back to I think it's the last one before this little series actually, where you get your Cat A and Cat B fit outs, where your Cat A is setting out a building to just be used and powered, and then your Cat B is unique to the actual people who are going to occupy the space. So maybe you just put some general lighting and power in, and then down the line they actually want some desks setting up here, and they want a canteen over there, and all the rest of it, you make it to the spec they actually want. So that's that side of things. And again, you might have to use different types of access equipment. So in your commercial environment, you might be using powered access platforms, things like that. So your PASMA training is really important, IPAF. So you can do those things. You may be using scaffold towers, where at a domestic level, generally you'll be working off steps and ladders, unless you're in one of the other areas we're going to speak about in a minute. So yeah, that's just to set that out. And then you've got your industrial side of things. And again, Mr. Bridgman, although they work on the low voltage side of things in the rail sector, that is still an industrial environment, I would say. And it's, it's typically where you might have, I don't know, railways, concrete, manufacturing processes, your water industry, your instrument and controls, wind turbines, and things like that. So heavy industrial stuff going on. That's what that area would be, and that comes with unique challenges in terms of design and installation. So generally, your containment needs to be to a different grade. You might have explosive environments where your glands need to be a different grade, your terminations to a different grade and standard. There is a whole other level of stuff you need to be aware of. The real things that Neil's spoken about before in terms of what you would bond and the red bond and some of the circulating currents that can develop because of that, and been safe in those workplaces because asbestos is so prevalent, for example. It's just different areas that you can end up in that require different skills, but the underpinning fundamentals are very, very similar. So your skills can be transferable between all of those places with the right attitude and some top-up training that we'll speak about later on. So we've then got the renewable side of things, which I'd kind of left off the domestic stuff, because I think that's a new and emerging sector where we're seeing this combined move between plumbers and electricians towards heat pumps, solar PV, thermal solar, so your hot water systems with solar, and your air source heat pumps, and all these kind of technologies merging together into the renewable space, the prosumer side of things. So if you're really interested in that, as we are now as a business, that's primarily what we're kind of doing at the minute, because my employees really want to, and I've really enjoyed that learning, as I've spoke about before as well. It's kind of reinvigorated me to a certain level. So there's all of that where you can jump on roofs in all of those sections we spoke about, so the domestic, commercial, and industrial environments, and install renewable systems, so your battery storage, PV generation. You may be tying up with heat pumps and stuff as well. And that's really exciting. That's a huge growth area for industry, I think, because we've kind of got, I think, is it 4 or 5% of roof spaces in the UK have solar PV on at the minute, and air source heat pumps, I believe, are at a similar sort of level to that, maybe even lower. And the drive of government at a political level is to totally transform that, and that's going to see the large push, I think, in demand from industry. So getting yourself qualified in those areas is absolutely key, even if you're not interested in installing it, because there's every probability you're going to be asked to maintain it later on down the line. And in the industry, figures speak for themselves. Again, looking at TESP, I think they said there was 11,000 apprentices enter industry last year, but there's more people leaving at the minute, so the work pool is shrinking rather than growing, and the demand is supposedly ever increasing. They're going about the skills shortage and such. We do still see those job losses. I see it in Apprentice 1-to-1 where businesses fail and it's hard for people to get re-employed. So I'm not sure on the finer points of that. I think we're still at a bit of a crossroads, if you like, where we're on that upward trajectory of needing people, but there's still those difficult bumps. We've had HS2 roll back. I think that's had a knock-on effect on some of the large-scale things. New build houses seems to have slowed down, and there's the labour force from there trying to get reallocated into other parts of industry. So it's a tricky one, but I think looking more medium to long term, the prospects are ginormous. Being an electrician is going to generally keep you in well-paid work for a very, very long time. All been well looking at the industry figures. And the world is kind of your oyster. Your skills are transferable around the world. We'll speak a bit about some of the industry bodies and stuff later on in another episode. But if you've attained that qualification as an electrician and got your gold card, you can go off to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, into Europe, wherever you want, into the Middle East, and work as an electrician. And you'll be well paid and sought after as well, currently looking at it. So this isn't something where you're tied to just working in the UK. If you've got a plan to travel and set up abroad in the future, getting this base qualification will see you right in many, many parts of the world. So yeah, it's a key to do whatever you want, really. It really is. The career prospects can take you absolutely anywhere. You could work as an employee on a PAYE basis, and you could work as a business owner yourself. And we'll speak a little bit about those two things in another episode as well. But again, we've kind of hit our limit on time, so I hope that sets out a little bit on career prospects of working in the electrical industry. And again, these little episodes are all part of my efforts to join in with the celebration of National Apprenticeship Week along the theme of skills for life. If you've got any questions or comments, please do drop them in below. I'll get the guys and girls who help out with Apprentice One-to-One to keep an eye on those, because they will be able to answer way better than I can. So don't be shy, drop those in, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you on the next episode very soon. So you've been listening to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast, and a huge shout out to our supporters and sponsors, and they are Team IMD, which is Proteus, Tamlex, Centaur, M2, and others in that group, LK Energy Switches and Controls, Modexsoft Electrical OM, Klein Tools and Superrod, Test Instrument Solutions, aka TIS, and the Installer Trades Installer Show group. We massively appreciate that support, and thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed this week's show.